All right, let's go and study. So, morning, or I guess it's lunchtime for most of us. Good lunchtime to everyone. So, Rayim Tov. If you weren't here last time, that's fine. We'll do a quick catch up, but we're sort of doing part two, which probably there's going to end up being part three next week. We have begun our discussion of the conservative movement's approach to Jewish law, and in particular, recent shuvot, recent legal rulings. And we are looking at a recent question that was brought to the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards about the rise of electric cars and the increased purchasing that so many members of our congregation have electric cars. And does that change or how does that affect this question of driving to synagogue? What's kosher? Are you allowed to drive to synagogue? Are there preferences of what type of vehicle or way you make to synagogue? And now that there's electric cars, there are hybrid cars, and then there are just cars, conventional gas powered cars. We really looked last time at the other issues. We looked sort of at everything but the engine. Anyone remember, just to sort of refresh our memories, what were some of the things that were discussed that were questions in general about driving other than the actual engine?
Distance or to have to travel was one of the
Yeah, so there's a concept called tchumim, boundaries, based on an understanding um, of one of the laws from the Torah about Shabbat is that there's idea of staying local, that you're not supposed to cross a certain boundary. And if you do, then you sort of break the spirit of Shabbat. Shabbat, you're supposed to stay close to home and within your own community. Do you remember what the rabbis actually had like a distance designation for the boundary?
It was a bunch of cubits.
It was a lot of cubits. Yeah. It was a lot of cubits. Yeah, you're reminding me of the that episode with
Um, didn't
Bill
we also?
Cosby. I'm not sure if we're allowed to say his name anymore, but Noah, build me an ark. Yeah. So right, the answer was 8 miles. If you go in an area where there's no civilization, no sort of, again, in our area where there's pepper pike, beechwood, orange, and everything sort of on top of each other, that's actually still considered one area, and the boundaries are fuzzy because we break them up into little municipalities, but it's really one area where there's not undeveloped property. But the
I
rabbis
believe
don't
we
want
talked
us.
about what
Yeah.
is east of Pepper Pike and Orange. You
All
don't have to
right.
go very far to be into what looks like pretty sparse
That,
population area.
that was our question about
Yep,
Chesterland or further.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
Burton or something. Yeah.
Rabbi, was another thing muksa that what
Yes. Yeah, we
my
sort of talked a little bit about muksa. That was towards the end. Yeah, what is muksa?
things that become forbidden or inappropriate on Shabbos that are fine the rest of the week. You know, the big question the rabbis had is if a chicken lays an egg on Shabbos, can you eat the egg? Anyway, but I thought it was in the context of things that can go wrong with a car,
Yeah.
tools, or did we talk about tires? I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nelson, I muted you because you were bringing a lot of static, but where you want to talk, just unmute yourself. It's okay. We're happy you're here. Yeah. So like one of the prime examples of muksa is a remote control. Yeah. If you can see my screen, you can see, a remote. I mean, you can envision what a remote control is if you can't see my screen. But right, like if I touch if a remote control is sitting on my dining room table, right? And it's Shabbat now, and I see it there. and I pick it up because I want to move it out of the way to have Shabbos dinner, I might be tempted or reminded or even forget it's Shabbat, and I might, because it's what do you do with the remote control? You turn your TV on, right? Right? So that's this idea of muksa, that there are certain things that you should just never touch because it will lead you to doing something that will break Shabbat. Right? And that's the idea also, if you've heard of always people emptying their pockets before Shabbat. The idea is like you put a little tzedakah in the pushki, but really the idea of emptying your pockets is you don't want to have anything in your pocket that will sort of unintentionally, lead you to break Shabbat. You want to make sure there's nothing there, right? Take out your phone or your whatever, your pens, you carry on pens. All right, I feel a pen. All right, I want to write down a note, right? So you just sort of like remove all that stuff away. So that's this muksa idea, and that's the idea about whether it's in your car or a car itself or whatever else that we, that's why you sort of should be careful what you touch because it inadvertently leads you to do more things that will possibly transgress Shabbat. Yeah, Nelson? Now you got on mute though.
My grandkids say that outdoor toys like soccer balls or something are muksa. I don't know what's
No.
Oh. Okay, yeah, mute yourself and I'll give you the answer to that. Yeah, that's a very strict position. That's more strict than we follow. Outdoor toys and balls. Yeah, that's, there's a question. Can you play ball if there's not, I don't know if they live in an Eruv or not, right? If there's not an Eruv, what can you play in? Or are you going to make a hole? This is like one of those things like with golf. If you hit a golf ball, you inadvertently make a hole, a divot. I mean, if you actually play golf the right way, right? And you're not allowed to make a hole, right? Same thing potentially with soccer or other thing, right? You're going to rip up grass and do all these things that are against Jewish law. So maybe, but anyway, the concept is, right, they don't want the people playing with that. So it's deemed as muksa, which is, it isn't necessarily not Shabbat to touch it, but if you touch it, it will lead you to do something that's anti-Shabbat. The same thing as like if you have a hammer. The rabbis always talk about a hammer. If you have a hammer lying around, right, you pick it up, you might want to do something with it. Yeah. By the way, they say like what to do if you do have the remote or the hammer on your dining room table is there's a concept which we're going to get to when we get to the second tshuva. We're still on the first one called shinui, which is that you do something in a different way. If you move it or use it in a different way, you will make note that, oh, this isn't the normal way that I do things, and therefore I'm not going to do my normal thing. Or it's not normal for me to do this. So what are you supposed to do if the remote's there or the hammer's on your table? You like remove it in a different way. Like you take a folder, right, and you put it under it and you carry the thing on a folder. Like that's not the normal way you would move a remote. And you put it down that way, like you remember, I'm not like really doing it. Or that's the thing, like if you have to, if you don't use a telephone on Shabbat, but you need to, you should like use your dial with your pinky. I don't know about you. I do not dial my phone with my pinky, right? And that way you're like you're saying like, I realize I'm not, this is not my normal way of doing it. I'm not going to habituate myself. I'm doing this because I need to, but I'm trying to do it in a different way. Yeah, Sheila.
What we were taught, I mean, at Camp Ramah and all, is that you can play. I think even at Hebrew Academy, my kids were okay with playing ball. You just can't keep score. That was how it was different. I mean, Nelson's kids are, they're
they're pretty traditional. They're pretty traditional. Yeah, and it depends. Yeah.
But there's another reason why I always did not like the idea of driving until I had to, was I was afraid I'd get into an accident. And then I'd have to write and I'd have to call people and things like that.
Yeah.
Always.
The rabbis, that's actually the one thing the rabbis don't deal with is the idea of the potential of an accident. Maybe they think that every one that belongs to B'nai Israel and is a good driver.
Well, no, I
Uh,
just figured that between Beechwood and Pepper Pike, the police know me enough. I could explain it to them that
have
I'll
to
be
put like
multitask.
Shabbat mode. You know how my refrigerator has a Shabbat mode?
Yeah,
You have to like put a thing on your car, Shabbat mode. You know, if you have to ticket
that is
me,
a good
if you have to
idea.
ticket to me, call me at 6:32 tonight.
Right, that's good.
Okay. Yeah, Ron Fursky.
Couple of points. One is I know when I drive through Beechwood on my way home from shul, the Orthodox boys are all playing basketball all the time.
Mhm.
But that's and as far as the remote goes, put on mittens so you can't push the buttons. But as far as the phone goes, would it be permissible to say, "Hey Siri, call so and so"?
Oh, you're asking, can Siri call for you? Right? Can you do
Siri
it?
call for me?
Can you use AI or some other thing? Right?
Because that's
And
all I'm
that's
doing. That's all
actually,
I'm doing is talking.
well, and that's addressed. I don't know if we talked about it yet, but we'll talk about it again. And it's in this tshuva, which is um, when we come to the point also of with automated cars and driverless drive, whatever that's called, right? Right? Are we going to get to the point where you can pre-program a ride? Right? So this is a little different, but it's the same thing, right? Can I
Well,
pre-program a
it is
ride
different
before
because
Shabbat?
you still have Sheila's problem of getting into an accident.
Yeah.
But I'm talking specifically about a phone nothing can go wrong other than dial the wrong number.
Right. So I'll tell you, the rabbis do give an answer to that. I'll hold it because that's actually an interesting kind of. What do you think? Well, I'll ask the group first. What do you think? Is it kosher? Yeah, Ron Moskowitz, you can unmute. Yeah.
I think that Siri would be your Shabbos Goy.
Right. So that's the question, right? Is it okay to use Siri as a Shabbos goy, as a quote unquote non-Jew, right? To do actions for you, and do that, right? The question is, how different is that really than you just picking up the phone and doing it?
But
How different is, and also, are you able to make that distinction that then, like the next time I want to make a call and it's still Shabbat, that I'm not going to just pick up the phone and call, but I'm going to ask Siri to do it. Yeah, Tybal?
but I thought that I
By
understood
the way,
that
my Siri is going crazy right now because I keep pinging Siri. But yeah,
uh,
go ahead.
I thought conservative synagogues who have non-Jewish staff train the non-Jewish staff that when the clergy or someone says, "Oh, it's dark in here," that's an implicit
Correct.
way to ask.
So
So can you be implicit with, I don't use Siri, but if you can be implicit with Siri, to me, a non-human agent would preserve Shabbat more than a human agent that, for all you know, might be descended from Jews, but that staff person doesn't know that they're halakhically Jewish or some rabbinic argument.
yeah, so actually, if you're okay, I want to look a little bit at this particular question in one of the tshuva. This is the second one which we didn't look at yet, and Bob Leeson, we'll get to in a little bit if I want to just address this for a touch.
No problem.
This is what we were looking at was the yes, you can drive an electric car answer. That was accepted like 10-6, if you remember. This is the no, you can't drive an electric car on Shabbat, which was also accepted with 11, 5, and 5 abstentions. So they specifically address this question. It's a little different, but I wanted to just see if this helps us understand.
But it's also interesting, some of those people who are for it are very traditional, like Reisner.
Very traditional. And if you
I was
remember,
shocked to see.
I talked last time, some people also voted yes to both. So
So I was surprised at Reisner.
yeah, it's very surprising. Sorry, I'm gonna get there.
I mean, he used to walk to shul 3 miles because he
Yeah.
was the
Okay.
rabbi of my daughter's shul, and so he would walk 3 miles on
Yeah.
Shabbos morning. Yeah, so
Okay. So this is again from the more traditional tshuva which says, no, you can't. We can't use electric cars on Shabbat, and we didn't really look at it yet, so trust me on it. But they actually have a couple pages on this idea about Shabbos Goy, or the more formal name is Amira Lenochri. Can you tell a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbat? So someone want to read to me what Maimonides says about it? That's the indented thing.
Okay, I'll read.
Oh,
I'll
thanks,
read.
Eric. Yeah.
Starting with it is.
Yep.
It is forbidden to instruct a non-Jew to do work on Shabbat, even though they are not obligated to observe the Shabbat, even if we give them the instruction before Shabbat commences, and even if they will only benefit from that labor after Shabbat is over.
Okay, so here, the whole idea of Shabbos Goy seems to go out the window, right? In this one line from Maimonides, which is, look at the source, from Hilchot Shabbat, which is his Mishnah Torah, which is his law code. All right, you want to keep reading?
Starting with, this is a rabbinic prohibition, and its intention is to prevent a person from vicariously carrying out their normal work on Shabbat. Amira lo nachri applies in circumstances where one has specifically asked for the work to be carried out on Shabbat. But if one did not specify when the work is to be carried out, it is permitted to hand over the work even on the eve of Shabbat. This is the case even if the craftsman chose to carry out the work on Shabbat, for it was his own choice to work on Shabbat, and a non-Jew is under no obligation to observe the Sabbath.
Okay, I'm going to pause you here. So this is like dry cleaning, right? I have a dry cleaning service that gets picked up on Friday and it gets delivered to me back clean on Tuesday. Are they cleaning my clothes on Shabbos? I don't know. They got 4 days to clean it. I don't know if they're doing it on Shabbos yet. I give it to them before Shabbos, though, right? I'm not specifically telling them, wash my clothes on Shabbos, right? I need it back Saturday night as soon as it gets dark. Just saying, take my clothes and clean it, right? That's different than me going to Dio Summers at 5 o'clock on Friday before Shabbat starts, and then going back Saturday at 6:32 when Shabbat ends to get my clean clothes. When are they cleaning my clothes?
Yeah, but
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but what you're doing is, if I say to someone, "Oh, we have this with the landscapers, for example.
Mhm.
Mine were forbidden to come on Shabbos because
Right, we write that in
although my
our
Orthodox
contracts
neighbor,
also.
but my Orthodox neighbor has them come on. They come
I
on.
write that in my contracts also. Don't do work on Shabbat.
But
Yeah.
But I find it's more of Marasayan. In other words, people see it. They don't know that you told them to do this another time and that they shouldn't be here on Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
So that sometimes you don't have control. They come and do when they want.
All right, what do you think?
Rabbi,
Yes.
but the way I introduced it, I deliberately did it without an instruction. I did it with an observation.
Yes. And I'm
Which
only
I
giving
thought
you
was-
one side. Yes.
But
So,
Rabbi,
yes.
can you tell them go away? It's Shabbos.
Oh, the landscapers?
Yeah.
I do. I do. I don't know if you're supposed to or not, but I do. But yes, what Tybal is saying, and I only gave you a piece of it so far. Same thing with our maintenance staff, right? Theoretically, I'm not supposed to give them specific instructions, because it says somewhere else. It actually says it in the tshuva that we were looking at. I need to find the quote. Let me find the quote so I'll say it the right way. Hold on.
Well, you could also do it without saying anything and then just start. If it's cold out and you want them to raise the heat, all you do is shiver a little in front of them and hope they
Yeah.
get the idea.
Yeah. Basically, what the rabbis say is, anything you can't do, you can't ask anyone else to do for you. And even if it's a non-Jew, they're doing it for you, right? They're not, as wonderful as our maintenance staff is at our synagogue, right? They're not turning on the microphones so that they're going to lead services. They're not turning on the ovens so that they're eating lunch, except if they're going to eat some of that lunch, right? And that's why many of our ovens are turned on before Shabbat. Our electric warmers are turned on before Shabbat, which is what we use to heat our food on Shabbos. Right? We can't just have them cook. Yeah, go ahead.
But speaking of our maintenance men, well, well, it wasn't the maintenance men. I mean, this just happened this Shabbat, actually. One of the women working in the kitchen came up to me and said, should I use the dishwasher? Should I wash by hand? I said, I don't care. It's up to you.
Right. You didn't tell her to do it.
I did. I also didn't tell her not to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand,
So,
I think even washing them by hand is muksa, isn't it? At least it is for the Orthodox.
They don't use hot water.
Right.
yes,
They don't. Right.
The question is the hot water, but also the question is in our industrial kitchen, how much hot water do we already have saved? Right. You're allowed to use hot water that's already in the tank.
But you said you send away your maintenance your landscaper if he comes on Shabbos. What about your snowplow guy?
Snowplow guy. What's my contract?
And I know the snowplow guy comes to the synagogue.
What's my contract with the snowplow guy? Anytime there is 2 inches or more of snow, they will come. That's so, yeah, this is like that fine line, right? I don't say Saturdays.
Anytime the grass grows so much, it needs to be trimmed. It's the same thing.
Yeah. It's more of a thing like Sheila said, which is Marit Ayin, right? That I don't want to give off the appearance that I have workers working for me on Shabbat. And it also is, if I'm home, this is another thing we were getting to, and I know we're actually still just reviewing, but spirit of Shabbat, Shvut, which is spirit of Shabbat, which is there is a mitzvah to rest on Shabbat. That's a positive commandment. My landscapers, when they are here, I don't rest, and you've heard my dogs before, they really don't rest on Shabbat. So if I have barking dogs in my ear for 45 minutes, that is not a restful Shabbat.
You don't have Shabbos-stick dogs.
I do not have Yeah, I don't. Yeah, they didn't read the 10 Commandments this week. Yeah. Yeah, your animal is supposed to rest also. So getting back to what Tybal said, yes, the way that you're supposed to do it is you are supposed to phrase it in a way that you don't tell the non-Jew who is helping you to do something directly. Yes, it is really dark in here. Meaning, I sure hope you're going to put the lights on, but I can't tell you to put the lights on, right? I can tell the maintenance, there's a lunch that's going to be in Halpern Hall at 1 o'clock.
Actually, that brings up a point.
I didn't tell them they need to put the lights on, turn the heat on, turn this on. I just said there is a lunch in Halpern, just reminding you, there's a lunch in Halpern Hall at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, but aren't we telling them to do the setup? Because, especially in Halpern Hall, I know they reset the room in the middle of the morning.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's more than one thing going on there at the same time, the same morning.
We're getting very specific into this. It's a very difficult halakha to understand, the Shabbat Goy and Amira L'Nochri, what you can say to a non-Jew. There's another context, which is, this is getting to the snowplow thing, that if you have a contract for multiple days of the week and not just on Shabbat, it's understood that they're going to do those things. Like, that's different than specifically hiring a person just to do something for me on Shabbat, right? Their job is like the maintenance job is whatever we need at the synagogue, they're going to do. They put lights on and microphones on Tuesday also when we have a program, right?
Actually, you say it's dark in here, and they go up to the beam and they see these two great big candles and they light them.
Hmm. Right. So I don't want to get stuck in the minute. Like I do want to actually get to like electric cars at some point. Any Bob Leeson? Yeah.
Something else about muksa that's a little different. If you're in an Erev, it's permissible to carry your house key, but your car key is muksa.
Right. So that's the question, right? Like what can you carry? Right. And again, like you're not theoretically not supposed to touch certain things, right? If you touch your car key, are you going to be inspired? Not inspired is the wrong word. Are you going to lead? Is it going to lead you to drive? Right. Even though you're allowed to carry. If you remember, carrying also was one of the things that we discussed last time. You're not allowed to move things from one area to another, except if you're in an Eruv. And if you remember, they said, well, I mean, you are supposed to drive with your driver's license. Maybe you want your wallet just in case of emergency, Sheila, right? So if you remember what it said is you should like lock it in your glove compartment, right? So it's there, but you don't have to touch it or deal with it. And if it stays in the same place, yes, you're carrying it, but it's sort of going back and forth untouched. So it's almost as if it's part of your car. And if you know that some people actually have garments built so that their key is a part of their garment, right? Like a belt buckle or a tie clip or a, you know, you can do certain things to have your thing stuck in it.
So I asked my Orthodox son about, I raised the comparison between a self-driving electric car and a Shabbos elevator. And I asked him if he would use a Shabbos elevator. And he says that's only for the infirmed. So that if
wow, he won't use a Shabbos elevator.
No.
Wow, right. If you don't know Shabbat elevator.
That's because he is a new Jew, a Baal Teshuvah. Jews who grew up with this are much more likely to use the Shabbos elevator.
Because
it's
where you're at.
Yeah, let me just, if you didn't catch what Bob and Sheila are talking about, just a very quick definition. Shabbat elevator, right? If you're at a hotel and our hotel has 9 floors and you're staying on the 9th floor, right? A hotel where there's a significant Jewish observant population or a hotel in Israel will at least have one elevator that will stop at every single floor up and down all of Shabbat. Right? That way, theoretically, if you follow it, you can take that elevator and you're not breaking Shabbat. It's already traveling that way. Anything you're doing, you're not changing. Whether you get on or get off, it's going to stop at every floor, right? And you're not pushing anything. It's slow, but it makes its way. That's a Shabbat elevator. By the way, same thing people discuss and argue, like if there's a way to, now I'm sort of changing the subject, but this was this whole question in Manhattan. If you could actually make your way onto the subway without breaking Shabbat, could you take a subway? Like it stops at every stop, right? Like whether you're there or not, it makes every stop. It doesn't come for you. It doesn't stop for you, right? If there's a Shabbat way to actually enter, to prepay.
That's the kicker.
Right? If there's a way to prepay, right, and get on and get off, right? Here's the question. Now, again, we're sort of going off topic.
Melbourne, Australia has a streetcar that makes
monthly pass. What about a monthly pass?
I don't think
a monthly pass where you don't have to swipe. Right? If there's some way, like, you know, I know like when I took the New Jersey Transit, right? You literally got a card and you showed it to them. Maybe it's changed now in the days of technology, right? If you have a monthly pass, is that kosher? And it stops at every stop. Your monthly pass you didn't buy it for Shabbos, right?
Yeah, but you're carrying the pass.
There have been people who with the bus, you get to know the bus driver, and if like you want to go to shul, they know the route, they know the route, and they will stop and let you on, and you pay them later on.
Yeah. By the way, again, this is like pre everything. When I was in college, I mean, I went to University of Pennsylvania, not exactly a football powerhouse or basketball powerhouse, but we had an agreement. You could prepay tickets and your name were on a list. You didn't have to carry anything. You walked in and you told them your name, and they let you into the football games and the basketball games on Shabbos. They did. They did. So like,
And probably to the
right?
cafeteria too.
Well, we went to Hillel.
Oh,
but yeah.
I forgot. Never mind. You were eating kosher.
Yeah, we were eating kosher. Okay, yeah, Eric, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess on that subject is the aspect where you could have I call it honor systems where there's nothing to
Yeah.
show,
Yes.
and you can walk on, walk off, no issues.
Yeah.
Currently, getting on the subway in New York, which is your example, you have to do something electronic nowadays to get on. I would say
Yes.
no.
Yes.
Any system where you have to actually do something that's considered to be a paying action, I say no. Then the other half of all that, of course, is appearance of. So
Yep.
that has to be
Right.
considered.
That's
But
the whole question of the
technically, if there's nothing to show, nothing, and it just goes and stops and all that automatically, it gets so. But anything that requires a transaction to occur, no.
If you remember, there was one other concept that we discussed, which was the need to repair, or a fear that if something breaks, I'm going to repair it, right? If you remember, that in particular was both about a bicycle, right? That's something that we will repair. I don't know if like driving a car, are we going to fix a flat maybe, but anything else wrong with it, all right? And that could lead you to doing something that is that's not appropriate. Okay, so now we're going to actually look at the question of the engine, if that's okay. So just to back up one of the things, there's two issues. One is, are you allowed to use electricity on Shabbat? This tshuva that we're looking at, the one that says yes, you can use an electric car, says that you can use electricity on Shabbat. So I want to make that clear. The second question is, can you use a traditional gasoline-powered internal combustible engine car on Shabbat, which in 1950, the conservative movement said yes. So we're going to look at that part too. And then we're going to go back and look at, can you really use an electric car and to what extent? Okay, so we're going to do a little screen share
In the 50s,
and
though,
read through.
when they said that you could drive to shul, now I never thought of it in terms of what was halachic, but rather something for convenience, because that was the only way people would get to shul.
Yes.
Without, then it was like backwoods. Okay, we have to find, you have to drive to shul. It's almost like the same thing with gay people. In other words, retroactively, you have to sort of make up rules to justify
Right.
it.
But this is the question, and this is the question that the second tshuva is going to ask. The one that answers no is, if people are already driving, and if the rabbis consider the ideal not to drive on Shabbat, do you need to find a leniency to permit it if the people are already doing it? Right? That's the question, right?
Boy, is that a slippery slope.
It's a very slippery slope, right?
Everybody loves bacon. We know they're all eating bacon. Come on, let's serve it after morning minyan. We'll get more people to come.
Right. This isn't a question of whether we want people at shul, and it's important to have a Shabbat experience, and if necessary, people will drive and use a car, right? Right? Are people really waiting for a conservative movement ruling to eat at, like, oh, here's another example, like eating pizza at a non-kosher pizzeria, right? This is that, like there's been like 50 tshuva also on that can you eat pizza? And like, are you like staking your diet on this question? Again, sidebar. We can, if you want, I'm happy to go into those tshuvot and study them. Just to show you, this was 1950 Rabbi Newlander, who actually didn't write the tshuva. He actually was writing after the 1950 tshuva that said yes to using a traditionally gasoline-powered car. It must be clearly understood that whatever use of electric apparatus we permit on Shabbat, he was the one who said electricity is okay on Shabbat. We all allow only on condition that use is in consonance with the spirit of Shabbat. So spirit of Shabbat, also called shvut, that idea of resting, is another important concept. And here he talks about the idea of using a telephone. This is in the 1950s, was really important because that builds connection between family. You can cheer a person up, but make sure, right, the telephone should not be used for shopping or making a business appointment or a business transaction, right? So this is sort of like the framework that we're looking at. Okay, so we talked about all these things the last time. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're now at internal combustion engine. Someone want to read this quote? This was from the actual 1950s tshuva.
I'll read.
Thanks, Jackie.
The combustion of gasoline to produce power is a type of work that obviously could not have been prohibited before its invention. All acts of burning are prohibited only when performed for specifically described purposes, such as cooking, heating, lighting, or the need of its ashes. Burning for the sake of power was not included in this list, of course.
Can you see some heat? Yep.
Some heat is produced in the act of combustion, but this result is neither intended nor desired by the motorist. Hence, it fails in the category of psik risha l'onika lay, which is permitted by the latest authorities. The combustion of gas is therefore the type of work class is permitted by the latest authorities. The combustion of gas is therefore the type of work class as melecha
she'enat
tericha gufa,
legufa. Yeah.
according to the definition considered in Tasafot, Shabbat 948, a labor which, while it is necessarily results in a transgression, is neither intended nor desired.
Okay, we'll stop here. So basically, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but in 1950, they said burning for the sake of power, right? Powering a car is not a type of burning that the Torah prohibited, which was cooking, heating, or lighting. I'm not gonna, this is not like an argument or whatever. I'm just telling you this is what the conservative rabbis in 1950 said, and that the result of a car's motor that produces heat, right, was an unintended, an undesired effect. And that's not right. The result that one wanted from a car was to move the car forward. Take it or leave it. Okay. Any questions?
What about the lights on the dashboard and the headlights and tail lights and stop lights? I mean, come on, you're making lights.
I'm just telling. I'm just giving you what our ancestor rabbi, not so ancestors, but the rabbis in the 1950s said.
And
Yeah.
don't turn on the heater.
Rabbi
Don't turn on the heater unless you want heat. Yeah.
Rabbi Hal, isn't it like at some level the learned rabbi, because at least what I always heard the more learned rabbis are lenient than et cetera, et cetera. But
Well,
isn't
that's
it?
what Sheila was saying with the person who's newer to Judaism
Oh,
is
right.
often more
Same thing.
strict. Yeah.
But this
But Agus
reminded
was
me.
not. Agus was
Oh, these
practically
were.
Reconstructionist.
Oh,
Mhm,
He was
interesting.
liberal.
mhm. But
Yes.
Friedman wasn't.
I don't know which Friedman is this?
I thought it
Oh,
was
you don't know.
Theodore Friedman.
Oh, okay.
And
Anyway.
Adler. Yeah, Adler was. middle
What
of
I
the road.
wanted to
Yeah.
say is
Morris Adler?
Yeah.
Okay.
in some ways this is analogous to the really, really poor woman who brings the chicken to the rabbi, and the
Yes.
rabbi's trying to find a way to declare it kosher so they can eat.
Yep. Yes.
So
right.
they might have known that
That's a
this
different
was,
case, though, because that's.
but this might be, I'll tell you what, making the case in terms of how about spiritual poverty if
That's what they
congregants-
say.
Yeah,
They're
if
saying it's
congregants
more
be-
important
yeah.
for people to be connected to shul, to have a Shabbat experience, and other things. Right. But the question is, do you then have to say, do you then have to say something that's, is fire? What is fire, right? They're trying to define what fire is. Nelson, did you want to say something?
Yes. Maimonides, in talking about life and death, in terms of understanding ourselves, says that if you want to be an animal, you have to accept all the things that are required, which means you're going to die. But I would suppose that if you want to drive a car, you have to accept all the things that are required. And if heat is required, well, then you have to accept it. So the fact that I just don't like this argument. Well, you didn't really intend the heat or whatever.
Well, and that's why they're having these tshuvot, which we're looking at now. I'm going to mute you. Oh, thanks, Nelson. Yeah, right. Which is this? These are all re-lookings at these tshuvot from 70 years ago, which said it was kosher to drive on Shabbat to synagogue to do a mitzvah, and that it was spiritually necessary to be part of the community, right? And we're re-looking at it both just intellectually, but also now the fact that cars are different. Cars are actually different now, and are different cars going to change our position? And they're not revoking this 1950s tshuva, which said it's okay to drive to shul. It's just now, if we have options of how to drive to shul, what's the ideal options? And that gets into this next question of hybrid. Someone want to read the question of a hybrid vehicle?
Rabbi Hal, I'm waiting for someone to come and make discounts to Orthodox people in order to sell electric cars. And I'm not making it as a joke. I'm not saying it as a joke.
Yeah.
But, the Jewish mind would do this.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll do it to the conservative first now.
Yeah.
Someone want to read use of a hybrid vehicle?
Yeah, I can read, Rabbi.
Thanks, Sherry.
Use of a hybrid vehicle, while it has elements of both an electric car and a conventional internal combustion powered car, is potentially preferable to a regular car. While the hybrid vehicle is certainly preferable to a conventional internal combustion engine from the perspective of environmental responsibility because it uses less fossil fuel, it still burns some gasoline. There are different types of hybrid vehicles, but in general, when one starts a hybrid car, the gas engine does not turn on immediately. It comes on only when needed. Thus, the driver is only indirectly causing the combustion of fuel, what is known as a grama, which is permitted d'oraita, but may be considered a rabbinic prohibition. The Shulchan Aruch permits extinguishing a fire on Shabbat if it is done in an indirect fashion. Non-plug-in hybrid vehicles typically have a very limited range on the electric engine only, or a very limited speed.
I'm going to pause you here. Do you know the difference between plug-in hybrid and non-plug-in hybrid?
No.
Right, okay, so obviously, I mean, you might see right there those charging ports at parking, at parking lots of stores and right. So there are two different type of hybrid cars. One has an electric battery that has only so much charge. You can only get X many miles on that electric battery. Let's say 50. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Jacobs told me he got a new car when he moved here. He's got a Mazda hybrid. It's their first hybrid that Mazda's done. Only 25 miles is the range on that hybrid, but it plugs in. It's a separate battery that plugs in, and you get 25 miles when it's fully charged. After 25 miles, though, of driving, if you are fully charged, it converts and the gas engine kicks on and starts driving, and you're only using the gas engine. But the first 25 miles is just electric. That's option one. Option two is like a Toyota RAV4, which is obviously they have all different ones. This is a hybrid where you don't plug in. The car, when it starts, every time you use the brakes, that stores energy. So when the car drives, you're actually creating stored energy, which is then used. As much of it as it's used and it's saved. And then when it's done, the car automatically, without thinking, switches from that saved energy, which goes into a battery, and then it goes back to the gas. And then it saves some. So it has 10 miles in reserve. You don't lose that charge that it gains while driving, but you never plug it in. You can never fill it up with electricity. It just has however much it got while driving previous time. That is a non-plug-in hybrid. Okay, you want to keep reading, Sherry? This is the non-plug-in.
It is inevitable that the gas engine will turn on at some point in the journey to the synagogue. It would fall under the category of Sik Reisha, an inevitable result, and would be considered forbidden by one who does not permit an internal combustion engine on Shabbat to drive to synagogue.
All right, if you're not confused enough, right, this is like that RAV4 that you don't plug in. It only has whatever was made while you were driving and hitting the brakes and whatever. It stores up energy that stays in the battery. So you have 10 miles sitting there, but you live 11 miles from the synagogue. Right, so you're coasting on hybrid energy for a while, but at some point, as you're nearing the shul, it switches on, and the gasoline-powered engine turns on, and you got to come home too, still, right? So it's saying not ideal, given this thing. Okay, keep going.
On the other hand, with a plug-in hybrid, there is a very good chance the drive could be made without the internal combustion engine coming on at all. Since it is not inevitable for the internal combustion engine to come on, it would qualify as a grama only and be permitted even if one held that internal combustion was a derivative of fire.
Right, so according to this, the better thing is a plug-in hybrid where you're probably not going to use any gasoline-powered engine. And right, the grama is that as you're driving, it still also saves some charge with the brakes because it has that system in it too. So you actually are storing energy for later or after Shabbat, but you're not using the traditional combustion engine. As long as you live within the range, right? Right, and Rabbi Jacobs' example of his 25 mile, that's actually a pretty small. Most cars have a much larger range that are plug-in hybrids than 25 miles. Questions on this idea of hybrid, and then we're going to get to fully electric, which is the last thing. That's next. Comments, questions, thoughts? Do you sort of get it?
I would assume that with a plug-in, that when you got to wherever you're going, you couldn't plug it in.
Correct, on Shabbat. Right, they don't actually address that, but yeah. By the way, right, so also now, charging stations you have to pay. Like, I don't know if like the shul had a charging station, but when you go to charging stations, you actually have to pay. I only know this because we did a hospital visit together, and we pulled up to go to UH's charging station for Rabbi Jacob's car. You had to pay. So,
well, interestingly, at my office that I haven't been to in almost 4 years, they do have charging stations there, and the way it's set up is you tell it who you are, but you pay by the month later. So when you plug it in, you're not paying.
Interesting. Yeah. It's a good question. Probably, ideally, you don't charge. Yeah. All right. And other comments on hybrid? Like a Prius is a hybrid. Like those are, I think now they make just EV, and I think you can get all different types of models with it. All right, let's read about just purely electric vehicles. Someone want to read? Sherry, you want to keep up?
Sure. As stated above, we follow the opinion of Rabbi Newlander that use of electricity on Shabbat is not a malacha, prohibited labor, and as such, electric vehicles do away with any concerns about violating the biblical prohibition on kindling fires on Shabbat. Electric vehicles are certainly also preferable any day of the week, as they are better for the environment and do not directly contribute to global warming. If powered by electricity that comes from non-fossil fuel sources, such as wind, solar, wind, or hydro, their use does not contribute to air pollution or global warming. Therefore, while the CJLS permitted the use of driving to synagogue on Shabbat, depending on the kulot, use of the
electric... Two leniencies, which were, they're going to describe it now. Good.
Use of the electricity and of the internal combustion engine. The use of a fully electric vehicle on Shabbat only involves implementation of a single kulot, namely the use of electricity on Shabbat. Invoking a single kulot is certainly preferable to invoking two kulot.
Okay, so basically what they're saying is electricity is better because you're only, as long as you're okay using and you accept the position it's okay to use electricity on Shabbat, you're definitely avoiding the internal combustion question. The only question is the electricity question. Okay. I'm going to skip this. This is that question of can you sort of... Yeah, go ahead.
What it's getting to me, I read some of this before, and but it's throwing everything onto, they're bringing in climate change and environment suddenly, which was not, as I understand, it was not directly dealt with in the Talmud. And
right, that's not a reason to allow something to break Shabbat. That is not a reason to allow, right? So that they're just throwing it in as an additional reason why, but not the main reason why. And by the way, here, this is that point, if we ever get to the point that you can pre-program your ride or use an autonomous vehicle, just if you look at the last couple sentences, any electric device that can bring one to synagogue on Shabbat is permitted. That being said, the more that can be taken out of direct human hands, the more the spirit of Shabbat is constructed and preserved. If technology and capability of an autonomous driving car is available and safe and able to transport one to synagogue, then all the better.
That's going to be changing. People aren't so sure anymore
that it's so safe. Yeah. Bob?
Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
In our range of Jewish practice, is there any recognized Jewish group that turns off electricity for Shabbos?
Great question. Yeah, the other tshuva that we're going to look at next time, which is the no. Yes. Do you know who doesn't do it?
I have.
Are we saying Karaites are Jewish?
Yes. Well, that's the question, right? So, Bob, there are certain groups that have existed over history that are the Karaites and others that did not that are just follow the Torah. They don't follow the rabbis and the Talmud. So the Karaites are one example. They sit in darkness on Shabbat.
And no heat.
And no heat, yeah, nothing. They literally think that you can't light a fire, right? So you can't take advantage of anything. They turn everything off. All the food has to be cold. Yep. Cold food, and they won't even open a fridge. So I don't know. Yeah, like I guess room temperature food.
And no
Challah and peanut butter. I don't know. Yeah.
No children.
It's a very small. There's a very small group that still exists today. So we talked a little bit about this idea of spirit of Shabbat. So you do address this question: Does the use of driving help the spirit of Shabbat or hurt the spirit of Shabbat? Right? Like the idea is, once you get in a car, do you feel like does it still feel Shabbos-y, Shabbos-dick?
Well, as someone who experiences B'nai Yeshurun Shabbos live for half a year and through Zoom for half a year, being shul is preferred.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And they quote Heschel. Heschel is not a great, like legal decisor. This is not like they're not quoting Maimonides' law, right? But the idea of this is the quote: in the tempestuous ocean of time and toil, there are islands of stillness where man may enter a harbor and reclaim his dignity. The island is the seventh day, the Sabbath, a day of detachment from things, instruments, and practical affairs, as well as attachment to the spirit. Beautiful, poetic. And now this is the people who wrote this tshuva. This is their comment on it. Heschel acknowledges that the way we sanctify Shabbat is both by detaching, removing things, but also by attaching, by adding things. While we generally seek to detach from the everyday, the question of which tools permit us to attach to the sacred is ultimately a subjective and individual judgment of which we can at best give our guidance. What do you take from that sentence?
And do what we think is best.
Yeah, and that
if I stayed home,
if you can see my kosher.
If I stayed home on Shabbos, I would go crazy. My mother-in-law had this. In her late 80s, she didn't drive to shul, unless we're like on Yom Kippur and she wanted to say Yisker. She allowed Aya to take her to shul because she couldn't deal with it anymore.
Yeah, so they're here talking about this idea of spirit of Shabbat and oneg Shabbat, which is joy of Shabbat, right? And here their answer is, again, I'm not sure what you feel about this. It's a little bit of a cop-out, I think, but you can tell me if you agree or not. That is a decision that is ultimately up to the individual observant Jew.
It is a cop-out, but it's...
It's problematic to read that in the tshuva, though, right? Like, this is a legal position.
If you have not been there, you have no right to say anything.
Right.
Because sitting home all day.
Well, and that's even what they're saying here about electricity, right? Now I jumped to the next page. In their discussion of electricity, they permit the use of electric lights as an oneg. It enhances so that you're not sitting in the dark, right? And then Rabbi Nevins, we didn't study this a long time ago with the Thursday group, right? He literally goes through about 30 different electric devices and determines which one are kosher or not to use on Shabbat.
Well, I mean, when I grew up, we did not put lights on Shabbos. We had a bulb going the whole night. I learned how to sleep with a light on. Of course, living in New York, there are a lot of lights out in the street too.
So I'm going to give you it's 1:03. So I'm going to give you their closing comments, and then we'll see if anyone wants to talk for a minute or two more. While we are not necessarily in this paper extending this leniency of the use of internal combustion engine for the purposes as Rabbi Abelson's suggestion, we are comfortable extending these examples as forms of oneg Shabbat, joy of Shabbat, for which the use of electricity, including electric vehicles, are permitted. Because the electrical vehicle is still similar in form and speed to the internal combustible engine, and in that way is more suggestive of a weekday activity than walking or using a bicycle on Shabbat, we see its use as less preferable to walking or using a bike, but still permitted. Psak-din, this is their conclusion. For those driving on Shabbat, driving an all-electric car is preferable to driving a conventional car. 4. Other uses of an electric car within the boundaries should be only for oneg Shabbat, like gathering with friends. So not just going to shul, but gathering with friends is okay, because that is how we make Shabbat special. 5. A hybrid car where the gas engine does not start immediately on turning the switch is preferable to a conventional car. 6. When possible, we encourage walking or riding a bicycle, because they are a slower pace, more conducive to the spirit of Shabbat, and not associated with the work week for most Jews, but weather conditions in Cleveland may also dictate which mode of transportation is more conducive to oneg Shabbat, to a safe and enjoyable Shabbos. Okay, reactions, thoughts, and next week we're going to look at the no tshuva and see why. But comments, thoughts? You're sold? Everybody's going out and getting an electric vehicle now?
Could go look for one right now. So I guess I'm going to mention something. When we were in Cleveland last, it was the snowstorm. And so we drove to Shabbat, and we drove on Friday to the shul for the Erev Shabbat service, but the parking lot was not treated, shall we say.
Yeah, it was not plowed, correct.
It was not plowed, and it caused a lot of difficulty.
Yeah.
So in a situation like that, we were actually in a position of having to do more, I hate to say it's work, than would have otherwise been necessary. So there was the whole question came up about that. But
I always say on days like that, it's easier to walk from my house than for you guys
it's easier
to
to walk
drive.
from your house. So welcome to your house.
And probably safer. Yeah, that's a good question, right? And of course, we did have the contract with the snowplow to plow every 2 hours. I did have, when we actually called them before, again, I don't know if we're allowed to, but we called them Friday afternoon and said, please plow before 6 o'clock. And they did it.
Yep.
Yeah.
6 o'clock
Nelson?
Saturday.
Well, the case that I wanted to discuss was not brought up, which was one of the times my daughter-in-law was getting ready to deliver. My son, they called the taxi, explained that they wouldn't have any money in their hands, but they had I think an envelope of money in it. And that if they called them, just come and take her to the hospital. And I know at Sinai in Cleveland, you could drive there and you wouldn't turn your car off. You'd leave it there and the attendant would.
It would be taken care of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's save that for next time, because that's the no, but then they talk about, and they actually do talk about emergency situations and other things and what to do. So we'll deal with that next week. Great question. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for studying with me.
Thank
you. And next week, we're going to do the no version. Okay. Have a good week, everybody.